Bill Ackman took on Carl Icahn in that highly publicized grudge match, but can the hedge fund manager withstand a sustained short squeeze? Reuters correspondent Peter Rudiger says the answer is yes. He just did analysis on this. Now, Peter, Bill Ackman, he's made a $1 billion bet against Herbalife.
That's right.
He's going against the likes of not only Carl Icahn, but Dan Loeb, who are going long on this.
That's right.
Why do you think he can withstand a sustained short squeeze?
Well, we think he already did sustain a short squeeze.
When?
If you look at the cost of borrowing Herbalife shares from about the end of December to mid-January, they jumped from under 1% to 7%, over 7% annually. At that time, the stock also rallied from a low of $24 to a high of $46. So he's already ridden out one of these. We think he can ride out another one just because we are told that his fund made their short position using cash. No borrowing money.
No borrowing?
Right. So
which is usually the way for short sellers.
Right. So he has no risk of a margin call. He can ride out the losses a little more than had he used borrow money to build his position.
But Peter, how likely is it that they'll face another short squeeze?
Well, these things are always hard to predict, but Thomson Reuters has a unit called StarMine that tries to predict when a short squeeze is likely. It uses things like volatility of the stock over the past 3 months and the short interest in the stock. And on a scale of 1 to 100, with 100 being the most likely to get a short squeeze, Herbalife scores a 95.
Wow, that means extremely likely if StarMine is right.
In the next 30 days.
But Peter, what would trigger a short squeeze?
Well, one way a short squeeze could be triggered is if the company Herbalife decided to buy back more of its own shares. This is a tactic they've used in the past. In May, after concerns mounted that short seller David Einhorn would launch a campaign against Herbalife, they actually announced a bigger share repurchase program. When they pre-released earnings last month, they didn't announce a bigger one, but that could always change going forward.
Well, Peter, I guess so far Ackman is right. The shares are down $10 from around the area of $45 where it's presumed that he probably started shorting those shares. Thanks a lot, Peter.
Thanks a lot,
appreciate it. And don't forget, take a look at the bottom of your screen. That's where you got those snaps, those headlines that you don't want to miss. Now we're going to turn to cable earnings. Disney wowed Wall Street last night with a positive report, but today comes Time Warner, and joining us is Ernie Scheider. Hey, Ernie, what happened? I thought cable companies, people started saying it's time to cut the cord. Too soon?
Well,
they seem to be doing well.
Well, Time Warner certainly wants to put its best foot forward into 2013, and so it came out today, increased its dividend, announced a big buyback program, and also highlighted some really strong units. Its movie unit, you just came out with Argo and The Hobbit last year. Argo up for a Best Picture Oscar, as well as its TV unit HBO, getting a lot more subscribers from Girls and other shows out there right now. So Time Warner really trying to put its best foot forward and say, look, like we can go into 2013 really, really strong. There are some weak parts though out there. Its Time Inc. magazine unit just announced a bunch of layoffs, taking a large charge there, as well as it's just basically the fact that more and more consumers out there are looking at magazines less. So how do you move into the digital age? That's a big strategy that they're trying to grapple with.
And they're also doing a lot of changes too. I guess a new studio head, a new CEO for Warner Brothers, and CNN's doing a makeover.
Yes.
But the stock right now is up 4%. On that news.
It was a big surprise for Wall Street.
Subscriber fees, is that a big thing?
Yes, and Time Warner expects them to increase in the next few years, which is going to be a very, very big positive right now. That's basically getting more money from each cable subscriber out there for each channel right now. So that's just more revenue in Time Warner's pocket for basically doing the same that it does now. It's a raise, sort of. As
has Disney. But we've got News Corp coming out with its earnings after the bell. This is the owner of Fox News and 20th Century Fox. There you got Rupert Murdoch, the head of that clan. What will you be looking at?
I think what's really interesting for me, I think as well as investors, is what's going to happen to News Corp after it splits, and that they want details. A lot of the 30,000-foot view material has already been announced in terms of executives, but investors are really going to be curious about, okay, how are you going to split up cash? How are you going to split up offices? How are you going to split up other resources that is currently held by the News Corp parent right now when the company splits in two? And I think on the call this evening, you can expect a lot of questions of granularity.
All right, and those shares down fractionally right now. Ernie, let's go to our hot stocks quarter. And let's start with RBS. Now, first is UBS. This time it's RBS. RBS paying a $650 million fine over an interest rate rigging scheme. Tell us about it.
Yes, it's LIBOR, which is sort of the unofficial benchmark for setting loans and other financial instruments around the world right now. And so RBS pleading guilty, as well as paying the fine to UK and US regulators. So never a good thing. It's a huge black eye, of course, when you basically say you're guilty of fraud. But what's really good and positive for RBS long term is that in the US, at least, it's not losing its banking license. And RBS owns Citizens Bank, which is a growing regional bank on the East Coast and doing a lot of other financial services as well.
So we'll still see it here. As for Ralph Lauren, let's take a look at its numbers.
Sure.
I thought they were going through a rough patch, especially in China. They're closing a lot of stores, but they came out with a good report.
Well, you stop buying their clothes, Fred.
You too. Well, maybe after the show.
Well, the big thing for Ralph Lauren is Europe, which was really surprising. And
Europe?
Exactly. I think a lot of people were really heartened by the fact that Ralph Lauren said Europe's not as bad as a lot of people think, and so they're selling a lot more there. Another good positive for Ralph Lauren is that sales at its own unique Ralph Lauren stores are increasing. It's not relying as much anymore on big department stores like JCPenney. So positive sign for them.
And that stock is up 7%, the maker of chaps, among other things. Some chaps that aren't doing as well, game makers, but Take-Two Interactive, it really came out with a strong report. The stock crushed earnings estimates by 12 cents a share. So what's fueling Take-Two?
I think when you look at Take-Two, you got to realize, it's that old story: you make a product people love and will spend money on. And Take-Two makes the really popular Grand Theft Auto video game, and they sell it across platforms for the Xbox, for the PlayStation, etc. And people will pay for it. It's a very popular series. And who is the target demographic? Men in their 20s with disposable income. So this really bodes well for them.
But a totally different story for GameStop. Now, GameStop shares are down as much as 11% at one point today. Why the different story?
Well, GameStop, a lot of its revenue comes from selling used games right now. And there's a report that came out that said the new Xbox from Microsoft won't allow used games. Basically, when you buy a game brand new, you're the only user.
So you got to buy new games for that?
Exactly. And I think we need a little more detail from Microsoft here and see if this report can be confirmed or not. Because if you can only use brand new games, it makes it less appealing for me personally. If you have a game you want to let me borrow, Fred, you can't.
You can't use it anymore.
Exactly. Not only between friends you can't share, but it totally, as you say, destroys GameStop's business model. So we need more information from Microsoft.
Oh, and I got games for my son, used games, so I got to think about that.
All right.
Thanks a lot, Ernie. Appreciate it.
Let's take a look at the U.S. markets. Right now, all the signs are pointing down. They had been mixed before. The Nasdaq slightly up. S&P 500 going slightly off its 5-year high that it hit just yesterday. The Dow Jones, we got Dow Transports lower today. The Dow Jones Industrial Average just can't seem to stay above that 14,000 mark. And that's it for Trading at Noon. Follow us on Twitter at Reuters Insider and get more Reuters videos at Reuters.com/ReutersTV. I'm Fred Katayama, and this is Reuters.